Time to look at another modern tank, and this time the director of the German Panzer Museum Munster will give us a brief overview on the history and technology of the Israeli Merkava I/II.
Hello everyone, we are today here at the German Panzer Museum and here is the director Ralf Raths.
My pleasure. Hello.
And we will talk about the Merkava.
The Merkava, as I learned from the Wikipedia.
Okay.
Yes.
Pronunciation is not my strong suit, as you might have noticed.
Mine neither, and I guess the Israeli fans are already typing. So from the pronunciation help of Wikipedia, it seems to be Merkava, but help us please out, make videos and send us the link how it's properly pronounced. So, but we know the meaning, chariot, Kriegswagen. So it's a relatively generic term. It's just a Merkava, it's a chariot, it's the chariot. The more interesting name is the Iron Wall of Zion, taken from the Zionistic movement from the 1920s, consciously taken as a symbol that this first original Israeli tank design should be the iron wall of the state, exactly. And I guess we talk about all that's special about this tank, right?
Yeah, the origin a bit, and then some special.
So just the whole package.
Yeah, just the whole. I mean,
okay,
you know it already.
People sit down. No, I'll make it short. The basic points. Okay, the basic points are: after Israel was founded, they needed to have an army quickly, obviously. So the first thing they did was to buy old tanks. Naturally, they bought old Sherman tanks. Later updated Sherman tanks, then they bought French AMX tanks, they bought British tanks, they bought whatever they could. Problem was, when you can buy a tank, it's usually outdated or it's much too expensive. So they had their tanks in the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, but always 1 or 2 generations behind. So first thing they became were masters of renovation. They massively remodeled their tanks. The Israeli Shermans are nothing like all other Shermans. It's very interesting what they made with what they had. Very interesting, actually a video of its own for you, but not the point here. Thing is, what they really wanted was a tank which was modern at the time and that was always available. Not just by sheer luck if there's something left over from other armies. So what they wanted to do was, as a second step, to make a cooperation with the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and the idea was that they would support the Chieftain program of the British and then build it as a licensed model in Israel. So they would at least, even if it's a foreign model, an own factory to build their own tanks autonomously. Sadly, politics came in the way. Or the bargaining about oil with the Arabs and the Israelis and the British led to the fact that this whole concept didn't come through. So once again, the Israelis were standing there and saying, okay, we need a tank. We really need a tank now, especially since the neo-Soviet models were delivered to the Arab states in the neighborhood at this time. So what they did was, okay, we take the money we have and we build our own tank. And the Merkava is the product that came out of it. Timeline first was relatively quick. They went to the drawing board. The idea was born in 1970, an own tank for own needs or special needs. The design started in 71. The plan was to present the tank in 79, so roughly 8 years, and they kept the plan. They presented it at the Day of Independence in 79. And the far more interesting thing is they cut costs. They were allowed 100 million by the Israeli parliament, and they just used 65 million. So they left over a third of the money they got. That's incredible if you know anything about tank history.
Usually invest in it's more, and then fail.
And then fail, exactly. Main Battle Tank 70 comes to mind. Always more expensive, same time, and then project is dead. Thing is, they did not only keep the time plan and cut costs, they also built one of the best tanks in the world. So first of all, the overall assessment of the Merkava is always one of the best tanks in the world. Usually followed by but, because it's designed for a very specific role, which is nothing bad, but it has to be said, if people want to talk about the best tank in the world, we always think about versatile, all roles main battle tanks, and the Merkava is nothing like that. The Merkava was built especially for the needs of the Israeli state, and everything in it reflects that. So with this segue, we come to the technical aspects of the tank, because it's really interesting. It's one of the most interesting tanks we have in our collection. I'm very thankful we have it. Our Merkava is a answering gift from the Israelis in 1998. The Germans gave a Leopard 1, I guess, or 2, one Leopard, I don't remember, as a present to the Israelis, and in 2004 we received this Merkava as a return. Very nice. What we are seeing here is a Merkava I/2. The Israelis don't throw away anything. They just upgrade and upgrade. They are now, I think, at the Merkava 4 version 3 or so. So this is a Merkava I with added aspects of the Model 2. We get into detail in the next moment. The main thing about the Merkava is always crew first. The survivability of the crew is the main thing. Everything in this tank is designed to rescue, to save the crew. It even accepts that a mobility kill, that the system breaks down, that the system can't be used any further, that the chance for this is higher. Main point is, this is one of the very, very few tank designs in which the engine is in the front. I don't know of any series produced main tank model where this is the case. Maybe you do. There are prototypes oftentimes, but it's never been done. Normally the engine is always in the back. So the Israelis, or more to the point, Israel Tal, the main responsible person, the general who designed this with a designer. Those two were the big minds behind this tank. And the idea was, okay, we put the tank, the engine in the front of the tank as a massive shield. And yes, this means that, as we know, 60% of the fire are concentrated on the front of the tank, normally in the statistical case. And we have to move because there are motion sensors here. Okay, I think work. Okay, I think we have enough light.
Yeah,
okay.
Enough.
So get used to the color change. Where was I? They put the engine in the front. Yes, and accepted that even if there are multiple hits and the engine is killed, the crew will still more likely survive because they have this shield in front of this massive shield. And as a bonus, they can get out of the tank in the back. Because the one thing that was made possible was that there's a big clam hatch in the back. I'm going to show this here. This hatch opens in two parts. It is a big door. It goes up and down. And the main idea that people always think is to get the wounded out of there and to get people who have to flee out of there quickly. And that's a bonus. That's all. It's one point they had in mind when they designed this. Main point of this clam hatch, in fact, was to get ammunitions into the tank quickly, because the IDF tanks were characterized over the time as snipers. They're very good at shooting. That's their main asset. But they burned through ammunition so quick they oftentimes ran out. So when they designed the tanks, yes, this added to the survivability, but the main point was to get ammunition in there quickly. But again, second point for the crew, even if the tank is a mobility kill, they can get out quickly there. They don't have to go through the hatches over the top. One thing that's pretty counterintuitive, which you wouldn't expect, is it's actually a big ball of fuel. Everywhere in this tank, in the turret, in the side, even in the hull, in the downside, everywhere is a layer of diesel. And the first idea is, oh God, diesel will explode. No, it won't. It may explode, but diesel has to get two hits. One hit to open the tank, so that oxygen can enrich the diesel, and then a second hit. Everything in the Merkava is self-sealing, so this risk is quite low. But if you have these hollow structures with fuel in it, with liquid in it, you have a perfect effect against heat charges, against heat ammunition. Everything in there, if the heat hits the Merkava, the heat ray will diffuse in the fuel or in the air. There are also
so
air
it's
compartments.
Basically composite armor.
That's the point I was aiming at. It's composite armor because they didn't have chop-am armor. When chop-am armor was invented and the NATO finally distributed amongst it, they didn't give it to the Israeli friends. So they have to invent something themselves. So that's the version of it. Interesting thing is the diesel this way is very well distributed, so the weight of the tank is quite good, which is needed because the front engine makes it very top-heavy, very front-heavy. And And the list goes on and on. For example, we are talking about desert warfare here, so the crew needs water. And instead of improvising something with water on the person or throwing it in, there's a 60-liter water tank designed again as a heat barrier. So everything there is for this aim, let the crew survive. Normally you say 50% of each part in the tank contributes one way or the other to the protection. In the Merkava, it said it's 75%. So everything makes the people survive. And the numbers actually support this thing. The Israelis are very, some people say fetishistic about numbers, statistics, because they wanted, when the Merkava was designed, they wanted to know how are tanks stopped, how are they destroyed, which angle does the ammunition hit, which ammunition does hit, what happens after the ammunition hits. And the rough numbers are that all the pre-Merkava models of the Israelis had a chance of 60% that a hitting shell would penetrate. The Merkava only has 40%. That's a third, that's very good. But the more interesting numbers are that the danger of fire fell from 30 to 13%. So even if the tank was hit, the biggest fear of the tank is the fire in the tank was massively reduced. This is added by the fact, for example, that when they looked at the statistics of the pre-Merkava tanks, they saw there were very, very many burn injuries for the crews because the hydraulics in the turrets tended to rip and produce an aerosol which then burned, ignited. So the crew was sprayed with hydraulics, and then this thing lit up. Or better said, the air in the turret was filled with the aerosol, and then this lit up. So what they did was they designed an electric hydraulic turret mechanism, and everything hydraulic is back in the turret basket. So there is no fuel, no fluid in the turret, just the electric parts. And the list goes on and on and on. For example, the turret basket in the back is not just thin iron, it's actually armored steel. So again, it's again for especially effective for heat, but also for kinetic energy shells, all but lesser. Did I forget something? There are so many aspects about this.
You noted about, they looked at the numbers, what Bruce killed, and I think these chains here,
that's
then
exactly.
follow-up
So
upgrade.
we now move to what makes the Merkava I/II. So many things were changed after the Merkava had this first battlefield experience, which were, by the way, very impressive. The Merkava, in general, held up over the decades very well. Very few were destroyed. And one thing they found out was that there was a typical Fangstelle, a typical shell trap beneath the turret. So, and the main danger was always the RPG, because they had to take this in consideration. So they added this ball and chain system. So what we are seeing here is a relatively lightweight. It's not massive armor. It's just this material. It's metal. I don't know if you can hear it. It's very massive, and it's not intended to stop anything. It's just intended to make the heat charge ignite, so that it starts the work of destruction too early and then fizzles out in the air beneath the turret. Works very well. Another added thing is that they added some kind of gravel on top. It's everywhere on the top surface of the tank, and in German it's the wonderful word Glanzgrad. It's how polished the surface is and how it reflects the sunlight. So instead of making color camouflage, they make structure camouflage. So if this thing stands somewhere in the desert, it blends very well in. Even if you look from above, it doesn't reflect anything. We mentioned the turret basket that came with a second one. The Merkava also has, because urban combat was always an option or a danger both for them. The commander has actually a mortar to its disposition. Yes, and in the beginning they had a 30mm mortar, and then they generously upgraded to a 60mm mortar, just for the location you needed. You see an anti-tank team behind a ditch or behind a hedge or something, and then you just pound into it. Interesting thing, the commander has an umbrella hedge, so he can open all sides of his hedge and is still protected overhead, which on the other hand is pretty ironic, because one of the main problems for the Israeli Defense Force are actually decapitated commanders, because Israeli commanders always liked to see and feel the battlefield. So they made the classical move and got out of the hedge, which is a technically bad idea on a battlefield filled with splinters and ammunition. But there you are. They made a risk assessment and they thought, okay, I think the tank has a better chance to survive if I risk myself and see what's happening, because as we all know, you're pretty much deaf and blind inside the tank.
Situational awareness in a tank is
indeed,
limited.
Situational awareness, another point, exactly. The tank is never alone. If that happens, something went bad very, very strongly. You always have your infantry with you. And you know the classical pictures from every war, commander looking out, platoon leader of the infantry standing there, and they are yelling at each other. The Israelis actually built in a telephone. I don't know if it's this case or this over there, because we don't have the telephone, it's been taken out. But if you're an infantry squad leader and you want to talk with your tanker, you just go up there, get out the telephone and talk to him, because it's coupled with his headset. Brilliant, easy design, strangely never copied by other main battle tanks.
I mean, we should end here in the Cold War, because the United States had it in the Second World War, I think.
Yeah.
But then we talked about this before,
right, yeah.
But it seems it was never
and
became not a standard feature for some reason.
I find it very strange because it's so cheap and easy to realize. And you always have this problem of on-the-point coordination between tankers and infantry. But what do I know?
My thesis, my guess, my educated guess here is I assume that NATO and the Soviets were too much focused on large-scale warfare, and in the Cold War mainly, and that was a mere detail for them probably.
I guess you could say that, but on the other hand, one thing that they really had on their mind was the nuclear battlefield as a rubble field. It's always about how do the soldiers survive and fight in the nuclear wastelands, which if you think about tactical nukes and the big nukes on the cities, you will always have broken ground, which makes infantry even more important, even if there are no cities left.
How long can infantry survive in such a battlefield outside anyway?
Yeah, they have to go out, fight, and get back, but they have to
really
coordinate.
Fast, yeah. So
but now we're hitting on the point that I find most interesting, and that has nothing to do with Merkava, that they never thought the nuclear battlefield really through. If you look at the Vorschriften, at the manuals for how to use tactical nukes, it's always do it, but there's no how and for what. It's just
no follow-up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just more bang for the buck, and then use it as classical artillery. But there's the problem you just mentioned about we will do it. Okay, we digress. So I think, one thing that was made possible also by the engine in the front is that in the backside there's a very large space in which the crew actually...
Large space for a tank.
For a tank, yeah, agreed. But it's pretty...
Because I was inside yesterday and I was like, I thought this is a large tank, and Stefan said, yeah, for a tank it's large, and for me it was like, donk, donk. Yeah,
on the one hand, but for tankers it's luxurious, it's lush. For example, when the Israelis presented this tank on the parade, they made fun of the world. The way they drove on the battleground, on the parade ground, and showed the tank, and then they opened the clam hatch, and out came 10 fully equipped infantry soldiers, which agreed had to sit like this in there until they got out, but they did it. In the first 1 or 2 years, the world wondered if this is actually a main battle tank / armored fighting vehicle for the infantry in one. That means there's, for the normal crew, much space in it, which, on the other hand, is, as it's an Israeli tendency, filled up with even more ammunition. So I think the stock number for them is 62 shells. And they go up to 88 if they use every corner, which they tend to do.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's the last of sometimes.
Medium, small caliber, or not small caliber like World War II around.
Yeah. But one thing is, and again, that goes back to crew survivability. It allows the crew to work properly. They are not exhausted by just sitting in the tank and operating it, like in so many T-tanks where the crew is just grinding through and exhausted after the event. In this tank, they actually can live, which is needed too, because oftentimes the Merkava are used in stationary fighting, so you live in the tank. Every tanker knows that you have to make your tank some kind of your home. So this is pretty cool. Additional effect is the driver is seated classically in the front, from here the left side. And unlike in other tanks, he's not compartmentalized. He's not shut off by an armored wall because the armor wall is replaced by the engine in front of them. He is behind that, and they decided to left the way to the driver open. Two things. First, the driver can escape if it's needed, and the team is together. Such factors were highly valued. It's not all about the techniques. It's how do the crew members work together, how they can see them, they can look after each other, and they can pull each other out without going out and then reach to the hatch like it's normally done. So that's another point. And if you add all this up, and I'm sure I have forgotten some points, it's a tank that's unique, not because of also because of the technical solutions, but in the viewpoint to optimize everything to let the crew survive, and in doing it very well.
Wow.
I think that about covers it.
I think I don't have any more questions now.
No, classical gun in the front, 105
how
millimeter.
much caliber?
105. Okay. In this case, I don't know if they upgraded with the 4.
Yeah, 105 and 88 shells is a lot.
Yeah, and disadvantages. There are not many, but one thing is, first of all, it's very, as I said, front heavy, which has to be compensated, and the driver always has to have it in mind. And one thing is, you have this massive engine in front which gets hot, and which kind of plays funny with the thermal optics sometimes. So you have this heat field in front of you. So that's one problem. But obviously, since the Merkava is still in use, it's been solvable, or it's acceptable. But I felt compelled to say at least one disadvantage, because it's not a perfect tank. It's just the perfect solution for their problems and their needs. Yeah, that's a good last word.
As always, it's very important. I mean, I once got the question how you would think infantry doctrine would like in the next 20 years, and I basically answered the question with, what is your geostrategic situation? And what is your goals and objectives and about this? And you always need
what are your resources you have?
There's no general solution for something.
Correct. Yeah.
Do you fight in a tank on open fields in Europe or in the Eastern Front or like in the desert and urban combat is regular or something? It's
to support your point, behind this camera where you are now sitting is the S-103, the S tank of the Swedes, built roughly in the same time. Complete different design. It looks like a computer game. Two different sides with different technologies, but also again completely optimized for their needs at this point. So speaking this way, it's actually surprising how similar main battle tanks are in general. It's surprising that there are not more specialized versions. But then again, that costs money and it has the potential of failure. Always.
One main difference between the two is this, I think, has proven itself in combat, and for this we don't know if it would have worked out. Yeah. Because there's I think one previous stuff I read in the encyclopedia where they discussed, I think, different aircraft types, and one guy just wrote, well, the discussion will be solved in the next war, who was right, the proponents of A or B, and we will see. And sometimes, in this case, we know for the S-tank it could be perfect for the situation, but it could also fail because something in practice doesn't work out.
Correct. Or the Soviets would have decided to just nuke Sweden.
Yeah,
could have happened too. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.